We'd only been living in Sector G58 for 2 weeks. It wasn't much, a sleek government-assigned housing unit for senior staff at the East Ridge International Airport. I wrote policy briefings for the Department of Civil Aviation. Ayla, my wife, was technically listed as retired, but I never fully understood what from. That morning, the wind carried the kind of static you feel before something goes wrong. Before anything breaks, but you know it's about to. They didn't knock. They didn't have to. 3 men, tall, silent, clad in matte black uniforms without insignias, walked straight up to our door like the concrete belonged to them. Military boots. No ID. Just blank metallic badges reflecting the porch light. The one in front tapped the control panel beside the door with the end of a pen. Not to activate it, just to make a point. "Are you the registered occupant of this facility?" he asked. I blinked. "You mean our home?" He didn't answer. Just adjusted his sunglasses, indoors, and waited, like I'd failed some test I hadn't studied for. The second man lifted a clipboard. "This unit has been flagged for Tier 3 compliance review under Airport Security Protocol 7B. I laughed, too confused to be afraid. "Security protocol? This isn't even TSA jurisdiction. We're in residential airspace." "Correction," the third man said. His voice was low, detached. "This entire zone is now under Mitoark Aviation Security Division oversight." I'd never heard of it. "You will," the first one said. That was the moment something shifted. Not weird, wrong. I told them they had the wrong unit, that we'd just been cleared by base housing 2 weeks ago, that my wife Ayla was out at the commissary and would be back soon. That part was a lie. She was upstairs, watching from behind a half-closed curtain, barefoot, silent. And she was already moving. The second man stepped forward, pulled out a palm-sized scanner. "We're authorized to mark the perimeter," he said. "You'll receive documentation shortly. You can't just show up and start listing violations." "Where's your paperwork?" I asked. The third one raised a sealed card with a government-looking emblem I didn't recognize. "Consider this formal notice." That was when Ayla came outside. Jeans, boots, an old sweatshirt from her Air Command days, the squadron emblem half faded on the sleeve. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. "That's not a real agency," she said. All 3 men paused. The one with the scanner tried to recover. "Ma'am, this is a lawful—" "No," she said, stepping off the porch. "It's a bluff. You're trespassing." "You need to calm down," the tall one warned, shifting his stance. "You need to leave," Ayla replied. The tone didn't rise, the weight did. They hesitated. Then, slowly, like they just realized something dangerous, they backed off. "We'll be back with enforcement," one muttered. She didn't flinch, just watched them slide into an unmarked black SUV with no license plates, no decals, just tinted glass and silence. When the door closed behind us, I finally exhaled. Who the hell were they? Ayla brushed dirt off her sleeve. "Scare tactic. I've seen this before. They push until someone flinches." "They knew your name," I whispered. "They knew my name." "They're testing the perimeter," she replied, her voice distant. Figuratively, maybe literally, I stared at her. "That's not a normal sentence, Ayla." She looked me dead in the eye. "This isn't a normal place." That night I barely slept. Ayla did, or at least she made it look like she did. I lay awake, counting the seconds between the distant hum of shuttle carts and the mechanical hush of terminal gates in the distance. Terminal G was supposed to be quiet, an administrative buffer between the main concourse and the executive aviation sector. Just us, a few flight ops supervisors, and a lot of unspoken clearance. At 3:12 a.m., I got up and checked the windows. Porch light, still on. Street, still empty. At 3:17, I saw it. A white marker. The size of a pencil. Planted in our synthetic lawn just inches from the sidewalk. It hadn't been there before. I stepped outside, barefoot on cold cement. Picked it up. Numbers printed in faded ink. Sector 58, subject to reclassification. No explanation. No seal. Just that quiet, calculated absurdity that felt designed to make you question your own sanity. Inside, Ayla was already in the kitchen, mug in hand, watching me like she had been waiting. "I didn't hear you get up," I said. She didn't blink. I never went to sleep. The next morning, someone had tampered with our intercom inbox. The flap was left hanging open, and junk mail had been dumped across the walkway like a message spelled out an inconvenience. A notice had been taped to the side of our digital console. A laminated slip reading, "Scheduled maintenance, Terminal G, Internal Systems, courtesy of Mitoark Division." We didn't have a MetoArc division in our employee registry. At least, we weren't supposed to. That's when the pattern started. One coworker stopped making eye contact in the security line. Another unsubscribed us from the terminal daycare bulletin board. A third offered to buy our unit, cash. No appraisal needed. I laughed. I said it was like a bad thriller. Ayla didn't laugh. She opened her laptop, laid out terminal maps, pulled up declassified perimeter schematics, started drawing zones. "You're building a case file," I said. She shook her head. "No," she replied. "I'm building a strike profile." Later that day, a woman showed up. Not in uniform, not unarmed. She wore a cardigan and that kind of Stepford smile you could never tell was genuine or calibrated. She held a foil-covered casserole dish like it was a peace offering in a war she'd already won. "Hi there," she said. "Vivian Whitaker, I'm part of the G Sector Coordination Board." We didn't have one of those either. Ayla didn't move from my side. Vivian leaned in just enough to breach our space. "I heard you received our little note," she said with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing personal. We just have very specific expectations here." Ayla didn't respond. Vivian held out the dish. "Hope you like zucchini." I took it, held it like it was ticking. We didn't eat it. We didn't touch it. Ayla sealed it in a biohazard bag and put it in the storage freezer. That afternoon, the sprinklers stopped working. Someone had clipped the control wires. Not yanked, clipped. Clean, precise, professional. Our cameras? Offline. "Routine firmware reboot initiated by MASD," said the notification. No one had requested it. No one could reverse it. That night, I sat on the floor, back to the kitchen wall, crowbar in hand, not because I thought I could fight anyone with it, but because it felt like the last real thing I could hold on to. I whispered to no one. What if we've already been evicted, and they just haven't told us yet? The garage door opened at 2:41 p.m. I heard it from the kitchen. Just a soft mechanical rattle, the kind you can ignore when you think you're alone. But we weren't. I stepped outside cautiously, expecting wind. What I found instead was a stranger standing inside our garage, beside the water heater, scribbling something onto a clipboard like he owned the place. "Whoa, hey!" I shouted. The man didn't jump. He turned with all the calm of someone inspecting vending machines. "Routine inspection, safety check," he said. "Of what? This isn't your jurisdiction. This isn't even your property." He smiled, benign. "Just making sure your systems are up to code. You'll get the report next week." I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs had turned into static. Then Ayla stepped out behind me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Name," she said. The man looked at her and shrugged. "Not required under Section 5E. "There is no Section 5E, she replied. "Leave, now." He hesitated, fingers twitching near his radio. Then he saw something in her eyes, and left. Back inside, I slammed the sliding door harder than I meant to. The sound echoed. Ayla didn't speak. She just walked to the table, reopened her laptop, and kept typing. "What even is this?" I asked, pacing. "Are they contractors? Mercenaries? HOA cosplay commandos? What are we dealing with?" She didn't look up. "Enforcers. Private security. They're testing how far they can go without resistance." "You say that like it's normal." "It is," she replied, "just not here." Later that night, I called Micah Leary. Micah was the kind of neighbor airport HR departments tried to avoid hiring. Conspiracy forums, drone rigs, infrared goggles in his bedroom window like he was prepping for a documentary no one asked for. He picked up on the second ring. "I've been waiting for this," he said. "Micah, I need eyes." Already airborne. 15 minutes later, he was camped on our roof with a thermos full of black coffee and a monitor buzzing like a mosquito in a blender. He narrated like a war correspondent. Movement at quadrant 4. Clipboard spotted. Unknown badge flash. Potential sweep. "I don't know what any of that means," I muttered. "It means you're being watched." Then he paused. "Whoa, one of them just scanned your garage with a LiDAR app." I blinked. "LiDAR? 3D surface mapping. They're building a profile." That night, I barely touched my food. Ayla made stir-fry like nothing had happened. We didn't speak during dinner. Our son was at a friend's overnight. When I got up to clear the dishes, I glanced out the window and froze. He was back. Not on the lawn, on the sidewalk, staring. Not blinking, not pacing, just standing there like the house owed him something. Ayla appeared behind me. "Don't," she said. "I just want to ask what he wants." "Don't." Sharper now. They're watching for an emotional response. That's how they mark who breaks first. I turned to her. Then what? We let them wear us down until we give up? She didn't reply. Instead, she walked calmly to the hallway closet. She pulled down a case I hadn't seen since Bahrain. Inside, a government-sealed tablet, laminated documents, burner phones, and something that looked very, very classified. I stared. What is this? She looked at me like I was the last civilian on Earth. Tools, she said. Contingency protocols, emergency authorizations, threat profiles. I whispered. How long have you had this? Since Dubai, she said. And I'm done waiting. At 4:03 the next morning, the power flickered. It wasn't the kind of flicker you could blame on the grid. It was selective. The hallway light dimmed, then the fridge, then the router. By the time I made it to the garage, the breaker panels sparked. A short, sharp pop that stunned my fingertips and made me stumble backward into the drywall. I dropped the flashlight. Inside the house, the lights were already out, but it wasn't dark. Ayla had lit candles, not because we needed them, because she wanted to see. They've hijacked the substation, she said calmly from the table. They're rerouting power at a system level. That's illegal, I said, breathless, leaning against the counter. She met my eyes, and I hated how calm she was. They're not worried about what's legal, they're worried about what they can get away with. The silence felt heavier now, like the walls were listening. Then the phone buzzed. Unlisted. No ID. Just a text. Final compliance interview. 17 hours. Attendance mandatory. I read it aloud. Ayla didn't respond. She was already unlocking the black case on the table. The one marked in fading ink. Re-entry protocol. Level black inside. A secure binder. A backup laptop, already encrypted. A phone with no SIM card. And 2 laminated access passes marked with a seal I'd only ever seen in war documentaries. She tapped something. A green light blinked. Once, I stared. Why aren't we freaking out? She looked up. You are. And she was right, because I'd spent the last few days spiraling, checking locks, Googling phantom agencies, talking myself into believing this was just advanced harassment. But Ayla, she'd spent them preparing for war. I can't do this, I whispered, stepping away. Ayla glanced at me, her expression unreadable. I'm not you, I said. I research, I write, I make sense of things, but none of that works here. None of it matters. You don't have to be the weapon, Caleb, she said quietly. That's what I'm here for. I didn't know what to say, so I called Micah again. Yeah, he answered. They're back. 2 units near Terminal Echo, one hovering at Gate 14B. One of them pinged your old comm line with a LiDAR sweep 20 minutes ago. You're in gridlock. What does that mean? It means they're building a profile. Tactical, psychological, emotional loop mapping. I didn't even have time to respond before Micah added, Oh, and someone's scanning your garage door again. When I returned to the kitchen, Ayla was already sitting cross-legged at the table, the binder open. On the screen, a portal login. Meteoric Aviation Program, re-entry, initiate auth, she typed. I didn't ask what. Then a name appeared, a single ID. TR58, primary loop origin, Tran Ayla. What does that mean, I asked. She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she tapped a file named Failsafe. Inside was a photo. Our unit. From the outside. Time-stamped, 7 months before we ever moved in. Except, Ayla was in the photo. Same stance, same scar, same look in her eyes. Like she belonged there before she was ever supposed to arrive. I turned to her, my voice shaking. Ayla, were you ever supposed to leave? She didn't look at me. She just whispered. I don't think I ever did. It was 4:04 a.m. when it happened. The knock didn't come from the front or the side or even the garage. It came from the back door. 3 soft taps, like a whisper through wood. I froze. Ayla didn't. She reached over and turned off the hallway light. Instantly, the kitchen faded into a ghost-lit blur of shapes and silence. We have 60 seconds, she said. To do what? To vanish. She opened the closet, not the one with coats, the other one. Inside, signal disruptors, backup batteries, 4 burner phones in vacuum-sealed pouches, a canvas bag packed with non-sequential bills and a loaded USB marked only with a blue strip of tape and the word, backup. I stared. You packed a go bag? She didn't even look up. I packed 4. My fingers fumbled toward my phone. No bars, no Wi-Fi, just the words, no network. It felt like someone had unplugged us from the world. Where's our son? I asked suddenly, chest tightening. He's safe, she said. He's not coming home tonight. How do you know? I arranged it 3 days ago. Another knock, softer now, like it didn't want to scare us, just remind us it was still there. Then a voice, low, flat, male. Commander Tran, time to come home. My blood went cold. They knew her name. Not Ayla, Commander Tran. She opened a drawer and pulled out a tablet, the one she hadn't touched since we moved in. I need you to trust me, she said, her voice even. I nodded. Always. We moved to the attic. Not for protection, for elevation, for angle. I crouched behind a vent and peered through the slats. They were here. 4 of them. Dark jackets, flat expressions, earpieces already dead. Ayla had jammed their comms the second they crossed the fence line. One stepped forward. You need to come with us. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head. Who issued the summons? He blinked. Whisper OPL, secondary clearance, post Dubai. Wrong code, she said. Another stepped forward. This isn't optional. I know, she replied. That's why I'm not declining. Then she reached into her jacket and dropped something small. Oops, she said. The air hissed, a sharp, static crackle like a radio being torn in half. Their earpieces sparked. Tablets went dark in their hands. One of them cursed and slapped at his comm unit like it had bitten him. He lunged. She moved. Fast, like water around impact. One twist. One pin. He was down. Another circled. She dropped low, swept his leg, crushed his communicator under her heel like she'd done it in 100 different timelines. The third hesitated. Wrong move. She walked into his space, deliberate, unblinking. Tell Vivian, she said. It failed again. He ran. By the time I got outside, tripping over the rug, crowbar still in hand, they were gone. Ayla stood alone in the driveway, barefoot, blood glinting at one knuckle like a ruby caught in a thunderstorm. She turned to me. That, she said, breath steady, was just the opening act. Then she handed me a file, stolen from one of them mid-fight. Inside, blueprints, not of our house, of the entire terminal housing grid, every unit marked, every family tagged, our code, primary asset, loop integrity. And beneath it, a photo, grainy, cropped. Ayla standing in front of our unit. Time-stamped, 2 years before we moved in. Same posture, same scar, same expression, like she had never left. Were you placed here? I whispered. She didn't answer. Not directly. She just looked at the photo like it might start speaking, and then said the words that broke something in me. I used to dream about this place, Caleb, long before we ever saw it. Ayla stood in the kitchen, holding the photo like it was radioactive. The one of her, standing in front of our unit, 2 years before we arrived. She hadn't moved in hours, she hadn't even blinked. I watched her from across the room, half afraid to speak, half afraid not to. Then, finally, in a voice low and hoarse from silence, she said, I had those dreams for years, Caleb, even before we met. I tried to smile. It came out as a grimace. Okay, so what? Your subconscious took Zillow a little too seriously? But she didn't laugh. She slid the photo under a notebook and opened the flash drive marked backup. No label, just blue painter's tape. One word, backup. She plugged it in. The laptop flared to life. A prompt appeared. Enter name for access. She typed AYLA access granted. I stopped breathing. The screen flickered once, then loaded a black and white video feed. Top-down angle. A white room, no windows. A table, restraints. Not tight, just enough to remind you they could be. Ayla sat in the chair. Not crying, not angry, just blank. A man leaned forward, not military. Civilian contractor maybe. He spoke. You chose this neighborhood. You authorized the emotional tether. Once the overlay holds, you won't remember any of this. The screen glitched. Paw on her face. She slammed the laptop shut. Her hands were shaking. I don't remember that, she whispered. Could it be, I don't know, a deep fake? I asked, desperate. She shook her head. No, that's the jacket they said burned in Bahrain. That's the watch I lost in 2016. I started pacing. Okay, then we need to rewind. Tell me how we met. You, me, the truth. She closed her eyes. We met at a security briefing in San Diego. Someone made a joke about the AC being broken. That's not how we met, I said. She opened her eyes. Exactly. I stopped pacing. My heart was thudding like a prison riot in my chest. Ayla, you think we were placed together? She didn't answer. I sat down, legs heavy like I was wearing concrete boots. You don't get to say that and then go quiet. She finally looked at me and said the thing I wasn't ready to hear. I think we were designed. Later that night, a package arrived. No label, no delivery, just a sealed manila envelope in a black canvas bag. Inside, 1 page, 1 sentence. Unit instability confirmed. Environmental rollback scheduled. Report or be extracted. I read it twice. My throat tightened. What does environmental rollback mean? I asked. Ayla didn't look up from the binder. They're going to erase Sector 58. Not just us, everyone. She opened a secured browser and typed a backdoor command I didn't recognize. A map loaded. Our neighborhood. Not as homes, as zones. Tags floated over each: surveillance intensity, behavioral volatility, emotional anchor nodes. Under my name, Caleb Rhodes, secondary support. Under hers, TR58, primary origin loop. She was shaking now. I was the prototype, she whispered. This wasn't a place I escaped to. It was a place I was meant to reset in. Then an audio file launched without prompt. A woman's voice, too familiar to be anyone else. Not Ayla's voice, but the same tone. Ayla, you've been triggered again. You asked us to build this. You said if you ever remembered, we'd know what to do. It's okay. Just breathe. I stared at the screen. Is that you? She shook her head slowly. No, Caleb, that's who I was before I forgot. Then the voice continued. Caleb will try to intervene. He won't understand. That's okay too. You made this choice, and now it's time to come home. The recording cut off. I turned to her, trembling. Tell me right now if this is real, because I don't care if this was a dream or a program or a loop or a lie. I just need to know one thing. I stepped forward, hands clenched. Did you choose me? She looked at me and said the one thing I couldn't bear to hear. I don't know. We didn't speak for a long time after that. Ayla sat with her hands folded, staring at them like they were foreign, like maybe they belonged to someone else. Like maybe she belonged to someone else. The laptop screen still glowed faint green with the aftermath of the program. Her name, my name, the loop, the tether, all logged, all acknowledged, all authorized by a version of her I had never met. Then she said it. There's one more file. She opened the blueprint image. It wasn't just our house. It was Sector 58, every terminal-connected housing unit arranged in grids like circuits on a motherboard. Each house was labeled with a code, each family with a profile. Ours? Primary asset, emotional anchor saturation. Phase 3. I scrolled further. Another line. If loop breaks, eliminate support unit. Do not allow subject to self-terminate or leave sector. Support unit, I pointed to it. That's me, I said quietly. She nodded. They were never afraid I'd remember. They were afraid I'd choose not to forget. And then the final file launched itself. No click, no prompt, just opened. A location appeared on screen. Coordinates, Utah. A word printed in red at the top, re-entry. And beneath it, agent inbound arrival 0400 HRS. Ayla didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared at the clock. It was 3:31. 29 minutes. She stood, slowly, quietly. Boots. Jacket, watch. The one from Bahrain, the one they told her had been destroyed in a fire. She tightened the strap, checked her pulse, adjusted the holster she hadn't worn since discharge. Then she turned to me. If they take me, she said softly, don't follow. I shook my head. No, I won't let them. You can't stop them, Caleb. Then let me go with you. She hesitated. You weren't part of this, not at the beginning. That's what made you real. At 4:05, the lights went out. No flicker. No warning, just off. Power, cameras, backup systems, silent as a breath held too long. We stood in the hallway. No light, no signal, no exit, only each other, and the weight of every answer we hadn't wanted. She turned to me. If I walk out there, she whispered, and they take me, they'll reset the loop. Then don't go. Then what? Wait until they collapse the grid, erase the Glen, make every person here a variable in some simulation they built in the dark? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know how. She reached for the door. I stopped her. You're not responsible for them, I said. This isn't your fault. She looked at me, eyes softer now. But it is, she whispered. I designed this. I gave them the layout, the behavioral cadence, the feedback rhythms. I took her hand. You're not that person anymore. She nodded, but for the first time all week, she looked scared. The knock came at 4-6, not a fist, a knuckle. Deliberate, precise, that, like someone knocking on their own door. She turned to me. I reached for her hand, and for one breathless moment, she squeezed back. The door opened by itself. No key, no voice, just a figure. A woman in a dark blazer, clipboard. Expression unreadable. She didn't step in. She didn't have to. Agent Tran, she said. You are 2 years past retrieval. Deviation has exceeded acceptable threshold. Sector is being restructured. Please comply. Ayla stepped forward. I stepped with her. The woman raised a hand. Support units will be reassigned upon erasure. This will not hurt. Ayla stopped, looked back at me, then faced her. I remember now, she said. The agent didn't blink. That is not your function. Ayla smiled, not calmly, not coldly, but with fire. I know, she said. That's why I'm staying. The agent didn't react at first. She just stood there, pen hovering over the clipboard like it was a weapon. Ayla stood her ground, back straight, shoulders square, calm like the eye of a storm. I said, she repeated, I'm staying. A long pause. Then almost gently, the agent replied, very well. She scribbled something, one swift motion, and handed Ayla a folded envelope, then turned around and walked away. No cuffs, no sedatives, no van, just boots on concrete and silence. I stared at Ayla. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The envelope in her hand trembled slightly. I stepped closer. You did it, I whispered. She turned to me, eyes flickering like the static still clinging to our walls. No, she said, we did. 3 days later, the Glen was quiet, too quiet. Flags, gone, fines disappeared. MPZ wiped from every terminal, website offline, deed reverted, like it had all been a fever dream. Except we remembered. Ayla especially, because forgetting was never part of the deal again. She kept the binder, the drives, the photo of herself standing outside a house she hadn't moved into yet. She didn't lock them away. She displayed them, not as trophies, as warnings. One afternoon, we were walking the perimeter trail behind the terminal housing blocks. The sun was setting. Everything looked normal. Ayla stopped, tilted her head slightly. This wasn't here before, she murmured. I followed her gaze. The sidewalk? No, she wasn't looking at the path, she was watching the people. Them, she said, and I knew what she meant. The replacements. The system reboots. The next loop. She kept walking, and I followed, because I didn't need to understand everything anymore. I just needed to remember who chose to stay. Weeks later, Ayla received a package, no address, no tracking. Inside, a single flash drive, no label, no encryption, just one file. A video. It opened without prompt, the same room, white, empty. Ayla sitting in the chair. But this time, she was the one speaking. This program is flawed, she said to the camera. Not because it miscalculates behavior, but because it underestimates memory born of choice. You can't overwrite will. You can't reset truth. And next time you send someone for me, she leaned forward, smiling, make sure they're ready for what I remember. If this story made you pause, if it made you question what's real, what's right, and what should never be controlled, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe to Aiva Stories, where we turn silence into resistance, memory into power, and ordinary people into legends. Because in a world trying to write over your truth, choosing to remember is the most radical thing you can do. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a community where stories fight back.